Welcome to the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views show. I'm your host, Diane Sawyer, and today we have with us Seth Durham, Assistant Fire Chief and Fire Marshal for the City of Reidsville. Welcome to the show, Seth.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming and taking time out of your busy schedule to help us.
Yes, ma'am.
We are really excited to have you here. I think that you and I haven't gotten to have a ton of interaction, but I'm excited to be able to get to know you a little bit better this morning. Tell us about who you are, where you've come from, how long you've been with the fire department, and just a little bit about you.
Okay, sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm Seth Durham, the Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal here for the Reidsville Fire Department. I've been with the department, it'll be 16 years in May full-time. Prior to that, I had about a year and a half experience as a call firefighter, which is basically a paid volunteer. Throughout my tenure with the department, I've served in various roles and capacities. As I mentioned, a paid volunteer, I was a driver, a line captain for 6 years, and then most recently I took a promotion to the assistant chief role this past July. So I've kind of wore multiple hats and done various things throughout my time here.
That is so key, though, to being able to be a really great assistant to the chief and the fire marshal, because you know what those guys do,
Right.
You know what they go through, you know what the jobs are, and being a great leader, I think, is very important when you've done those roles.
I would agree. I think it kind of gives you the opportunity to experience both sides or whatnot, and you kind of know how the guys think and what they want, and how you can be able to help and lead them and achieve certain goals and whatnot.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about fire marshal, that one side, because it's kind of like a dual role. There are things that you've got to do. Tell us what the fire marshal, what does that entail? What does that look like?
Sure. So overall, my responsibilities, I'm kind of over 3 different areas within our organization. I'm in charge of the public fire education, which is where we get out and we have programs within our schools, and we also host other training and events throughout the city. I'm also responsible for fire investigations, so any type of fire that we have, I'm ultimately responsible for the investigation process that goes along with that. And also we kind of get into our inspections division. I'm in charge of that. And that kind of is an interesting area within itself that I think sometimes people don't fully understand. And it's a lot that goes into it. And I think in a lot of cases people, especially business owners, because that's where we do a lot of our inspections, we don't really inspect residential areas unless it's going to be a apartment complex or a hotel, motel, something to that effect, but not private dwellings. But I think a lot of times we get a bad rep as inspectors that we're here to shut your business down, and that's totally not the case at all. We're there to make sure that everything is adhering to the code, which in turn is keeping the business owner and the occupants safe, which is our main goal.
Let's drill down on that a little bit. I am so glad you said that, because I do think, even as a chamber president, so my background, my degree is in public health education.
Right.
And my first role out of college, I worked 7 years for a health and wellness organization. And interestingly enough, one of my favorite jobs, so I was the program director, and I did chronic health disease management. We talked about diabetes, we did health programs, nutrition programs, and so one of my favorite programs that I did was with Martinsville City Fire Department.
Right.
And so I got to know all of the guys really well and what the fire department really did, and how it wasn't just fighting fires, or medical emergencies or things that you get the calls for. And I was trying to help them be better at their job. So one of the things was, in their 24-hour shift, how many meals did they cook? What did they cook? How could they be healthier? And another program of our organization had a fleet of bikes. And so they would
Right.
bike in uptown Martinsville on bicycles to get exercise and just to be seen and be out. And so I got to know a lot about how the fire department operated. And so the way that I ended up here at the chamber was I had gotten my nonprofit management certificate while I was there, and I was a chamber ambassador at their chamber. And so I had some chamber background, I had some nonprofit background, and being from Rockingham County, when this job came up, it just kind of all fell into place. So one of the first experiences that I had as an adult working with fire department in the business was that experience. So got to be in the firehouse with them, got to sit around the table with them. And so I developed an immense respect for what they do.
Right.
And so I was already prepared when it came time, but I will tell you, even as the chamber president, the first time the fire department showed up and said, "We're here to inspect the building," I was like, "What?" Because like you don't understand or realize that, and so we went through the whole thing, and you go through the fire extinguishers, and so tell me about that. Like, tell us about how it works, like how you choose the business because they're on a so many year, and like how that works and what you're looking for.
Sure. So the way the fire code is structured, there's 3 different levels. You have your level 1, your level 2, and your level 3 as far as your inspector levels. And basically, businesses fall under certain levels based on their use, their occupancy classification. So you take like a business office, we'll use a doctor's office for example. Most of those are going to be on what we would call a 3-year inspection schedule, where every 3 years we go out, we do a safety inspection. And as you mentioned, we're going to be looking at fire extinguishers, making sure they're still been inspected annually. We're going to check for egress lights and exit lights, making sure they're working properly, and just any other life safety hazard that we may see that relates to fire code. And then you also have businesses, or I should say occupancy classifications, such as the hospital, that is going to require an annual inspection. And we do the same thing. But also, it's kind of an interesting point that we've gotten into here in the city. We've had a lot of interest in, like, I will call our downtown area, of people investors are looking to buy and maybe repurpose a vacant building. And I think it's kind of raised a lot of eyebrows, maybe for lack of a better term. You get individuals who maybe are excited about purchasing the building and they have big plans and want to do this, and they may proceed with that, and then when the building inspector and myself come out to do an inspection and they tell us what they're doing, well, at that point in time, that building no longer meets what it was designed for. So then we get into have code changes and whatnot, which is where I think a lot of people get labeled the inspectors as having a bad reputation.
So let's expand on that a little bit. We'll take the chamber building, for example. When we moved into this building, we didn't own the building. We were coming into the building as tenants for a board member at the time who had purchased the building. But we were basically grandfathered because this was office space to start with, and we were going to be office space. So there wasn't really a lot of things that needed to change. We did do some renovations, and we did have to have inspections, but again, they were all just, we were telling out the teller line of the bank and building these little offices. And so we did all the right things, but again, because we work with the city and because we weren't at the time the owners, we were just kind of witnessing what was happening. When the building came up for sale, we were able to purchase the building. So now, as the building owners, which the chamber has never owned a building, we've always been in rental or in city property. I mean, we've been from the Governor Reed's house to, like, the chamber office has been in lots of property. So we're learning as others have to go through it, like we're kind of learning and go, oh, it's very eye-opening when you're paying the taxes and when you're, the owner of the building and we've had a roof put on, and so we had to go through all the steps to make sure. So I think what's interesting is when people go to purchase a building or open a business or move a business, they don't realize that there are all these things in place. And as long as you call the chamber or you call the small business center or you call City Hall, somebody's going to get you to community development or to the right place and will start to guide you through the process. But I always encourage people, I'm like, don't sign any paperwork, don't spend any money, don't do any of those things until you've talked to somebody, because whether right or wrong, there are laws that we have to follow and codes that we have to follow from the state. I think the difference is interpretation. And the city has been doing a really good job of being customer service friendly and trying to help people as much as they possibly can through that stuff. Some of it's language.
Right.
Some of it is just strictly like if you keep a building what it was intended for, but you can't go inhabiting a building and having an apartment in a building that has not been approved for having someone living in the second floor. And so and then there's whole first, second, third floor, right, in central
Right.
business, that there's all these things because what happens if you get trapped on the third floor and there's a fire? Or central business, all of our buildings touch. So I personally, as the director of this organization that owns this building, I want my neighbor to be safe and to have all the right things in place because we don't want to lose a whole block if something goes up, which just happened not that long ago.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Like how that was such a great job by the fire department, but also like the neighbors and like the people who saw it and called it in and just kind of all the stuff.
Sure, we can. Before we get to that, I'll back up and expound on what you was discussing as far as the people wanting to come in and renovate businesses, and as far as the approach the city has taken. Just in my short tenure as the fire marshal, under the leadership of our city manager, Ms. Summer, we have kind of formulated a team, for lack of a better word, to where we're trying to provide a better customer service approach. So we'll use you for example. Let's say that there's a building downtown that you want to buy and you want to turn into a salon. You as the potential buyer can reach out to the city and say, hey, I'm looking to purchase this piece of property. This is what I want to do with it. Do you have any recommendations? Are there any concerns? Can we possibly schedule a time to come out and meet with the code enforcement officials and see what all may be involved in making sure that I meet code? And we kind of come out as a team and we walk through the building with the potential buyer and we listen to your ideas, what your plans are, your vision is, and we say, hey, this is kind of where we feel like you can go with this, or no, I don't think you can do this and still meet current code. Basically, we're trying to give you an opportunity to do your due diligence before you purchase that property and then get told, oh, well, you can't do what you want to do. It's kind of trying to be an upfront approach, I guess you could say. And some of that may look like, hey, there may be a way that you can achieve your vision, but that may look like hiring a architectural engineer to draw up a set of plans to bring the building up to current code. But it's nice to know that on the front side, then buying the property and then realizing that you have to have an engineer involved and look at spending, a substantial amount of money just to get a set of plans. So it's kind of our approach. We don't want to tell somebody they can't do something, and we want to go out and try to help them through that process to make it easier for them so they don't get shocked at the end when they realize that what their vision is not achievable with the way the building currently sits. Does that make sense? It
does, and it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, some of that's been done in the past, but like informally. It sounds like you guys have made it more formal that certain set of folks goes out when we get those calls now.
Right, yeah, we've been out on several occasions and we've seemed to have good feedback and a good response from individuals with that. Because to your point, there are buildings downtown that people are looking at maybe wanting to run a business downstairs and do studio loft apartments upstairs. Well, when these buildings were designed, they were not designed with that intent. So the safety features, obviously they're older, the safety features are not there that would allow somebody to change that use or to go to a mixed use occupancy in order to do that. And so that's when we have to say, hey, if you want to do this, there's ways you can do it, but you're going to have to get an engineer involved. Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're not trying to rain on anybody's parade. We're wanting to keep everybody safe. It's life safety, especially from my perspective on fire code. It's all about life safety. It's nothing to do with trying to hinder somebody.
Yeah, because if you lose lives on your watch, I mean, that's on the fire department. Like, you signed off on it, and right. That's not. At the end of the day, like, it's not what you went into this career for. You went into this career to save lives.
Exactly. And then I think you had brought up a fire that we had on one of the buildings. It's probably been going on 3 years ago, I believe.
It has.
But anyways, thankfully it happened, if my memory's right, I was not working that shift that night, but it was late in the early hours of the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning if I remember correctly. And thankfully a police officer actually patrolling downtown area seen it, called it in, and the fire department got there in a timely manner and knocked it out and took care of it. However, had that not been the case, with the way these buildings are built, to your point, they're all connected, all touching. It's really a nightmare from a fire perspective, because some of the safety, some of these buildings are pushing 100+ years old, and the fire safety obviously wasn't a major concern in that time frame. So there's a lot of void areas and open areas that fire can get in and basically travel from one building to the next. And it's very scary from a fire perspective.
It's very scary from my perspective.
Right.
Like, that's something, I don't know why, but that's something that's always terrified me just from a young age. And I don't know if it was because my dad placed so much safety, on us, like, the buzzers in the house, like, do the fire, does everything work? I remember hearing, like, checking that and making sure that doors that were supposed to be shut were shut, and things that, because I don't think that people, my dad was just a nut because he was a young parent, and he was all about keeping us safe. Like, everything that he did was about keeping us safe. And so I think that from a business perspective, you don't even realize what your responsibility is, like you said, like the hospital, or anything that is a public dwelling, and that if we allow these things to happen. And I think I've heard nothing but really great stuff about the team. And I mean, we have huge windows and doors, so when we see you guys like up and down the street checking out stuff. But let's talk about why that matters to the city. From an economic development standpoint, you guys want there to be vibrant places to eat, to shop. Like, I mean, I was with the shift yesterday. We all got yesterday, one day this week with Jordan Fargis's shift. I was in there with all of them. They were getting their lunch at Turtle Creek. Like, they want places to eat as much as the next guy. But you want people to be out in the street. I mean, Summer had this great vision for this streetscape out here. And we want there to be really great little shops and places to eat and places to do business and offices and all of those things. But you also want everybody to be safe.
Exactly.
But from an economic development standpoint, you also want all the buildings to be safe. And honestly, like, occupied buildings are usually, I mean, let's talk about that. Is an unoccupied building safer or not safer, depending on if it's at code or not, right?
Right. So that's really a good question.
And I guess it could go either way, depending on the situation.
Yeah, it really could go either way. And I'll kind of reference another fire example, kind of relating to this. There was a unoccupied building, not in the downtown area, but close by, where some people were squatting. As a result of that, a fire happened, and thankfully there again, we was able to get there and get it taken care of relatively quickly. So I think, to answer your question, an unoccupied building can be dangerous from that perspective. If you have people, unfortunately, that may be homeless or whatnot, who may be taking shelter there, obviously there's no heat and things of that nature in those structures, so they may resort to some type of fire to stay warm, which obviously can be an issue. But if you go back to an occupied, like a business or downtown business or whatever, they still have those same threats and those same potential issues.
Well, I'm listening to the humming in the background, and I'm thinking, what's using electricity? Like, what's happening, and when everybody leaves this building at night, like, I'm really funny about, I'm like, okay, has everybody cut off the lights? And have you turned off everything that needs to be turned off? And 'cause at the end of the day, I'm responsible for all of the tenants in this building and all of the staff that work for the chamber, and I'm responsible to my board that I'm taking care of all of that. But ultimately, I mean, this is a large footprint in downtown, and we want to be sure that we're not the problem.
Right. And then let's take that scenario a step further. Let's say that obviously this building doesn't have it, but some of these other buildings where you may have a studio loft apartment wanting to go in upstairs. Well, what do you do in an apartment? You live there. You're going to obviously sleep, eat, cook. There's more potential hazards that can be associated with a living area versus just a business occupancy. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
So you take somebody living upstairs, if they're up there cooking, a lot of fires happen in the kitchen. now we have an issue. And if they only have one egress path to get out of that structure, and let's say that it's blocked, we really have an issue because we have somebody trapped upstairs.
That's right.
So that's what we have to, from the fire marshal or the code enforcement side, we have to look at all those things. And I think that's one reason, North Carolina as a whole, with the fire code that we have, and even the building code and other codes as well, they take that proactive approach to look at those things to mitigate the risk that may be associated with something of that nature.
I think to further that, I don't think people realize how many codes there are.
Right.
They don't realize that there's a historical code. They don't realize that there are things that you as the fire marshal are looking at. There's things that the building inspector is looking at. And so there's, people are like, well, I saw it done in another town. Okay, but the situation may be different,
Right.
And so I think that they have to understand that there's multiple codes that you all have to look at too.
Right, yeah, so I'm there again, I'm responsible for fire code, but a lot of fire code is kind of it follows along with our building code, which is going to reinforce the life safety measures. So if you, and I'm not a building inspector, but if you look at the building code is going to require that this building have a fire alarm and it have a sprinkler system and whatever it needs based on what it's going to be used for. Well, fire code just reinforces that. It backs it up and says, hey, we're standing right there with the building code and we're going to support them because this needs to be in place. We're making sure the life safety measures are there. And I think you kind of mentioned historical code. There is in North Carolina an existing building code. So there may be some avenues that somebody can explore if they're wanting to, let's say, purchase one of these downtown buildings and want to do something with it. The existing building code may have some application there. They may be able to, hey, you can put in 2 exits instead of 1 and meet code. I'm not saying that for certain, but that's kind of where we can say, hey, I think you need to get somebody a little higher than us. You need to get an architectural engineer who does this for a living, who knows how to make buildings meet code, and get them involved to help you bring your vision to life.
Yeah, and I think, let's talk about downtown for a minute. You were talking about the interest in downtown, but also people don't realize of the zoning in the city, why central business is so different. Again, it goes back to this small, tight-knit, the buildings all touch. And there's something to be said for, what are allowed uses in the central business. Some of that's safety. Some of it is just because for economic development purposes, they want these types of businesses in downtown because those types begat other types, which brings people and foot traffic downtown. So, there's like all these pieces that go together and people want to pick apart one, but they don't look at like the whole piece.
Exactly.
And so, I've always wondered why we needed an architect, but you in this little short segment have really brought it all together for me and made me understand kind of from start to finish, if they get to that point, why they would need that. That makes a lot of sense to me because putting it in the perspective of these buildings are older, and let's talk about that. This was a bank way back, like in the early 1900s. This was built as First National Bank all those years ago. We've got vaults. We have 2 on this floor, 1 upstairs. We've got dumb waiters that have to be, all these things that have to be inspected. We've got a vault that's underneath the sidewalk out here. What happens if, and the manhole, and it comes up in the sidewalk. So there are all these things, and obviously really small. People used to be so much smaller way back in the day. But, I just don't think, and so you've done a really good job. I am really excited about this segment and for people to understand kind of your side of why things are like they are. And that y'all are willing to help people.
Right, exactly. I appreciate that. And I think kind of to tie this up or whatnot, I hope I'm portraying the message that myself and the other building code enforcement officials, as well as the city management team, at the end of the day, we're customer service based, and we want to help people. When I know a lot there again, as I mentioned earlier, when the inspectors show up, it's always, oh Lord, what are they going to find today, or what are they going to tell me I can and can't do today? And that's really not what we're here for. We're trying to make sure that everything is up to par, that all the life safety measures are in place, and that everybody is protected, including the owner of the building, the business occupant, and even the people that patronage there. We want to make sure everybody's safe at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, let's do something else. We're almost out of time, but I know we want to talk about another piece of your job. Let's talk about the public piece and the kids.
Sure.
Let's talk about the programs that you do and you offer. We talked about taking out the firehouse. But tell me a little bit about that.
So as I mentioned, part of my job is being responsible for the public education. That looks like, for us, we have a program with the school system here in the city. Well, really the county, but the city schools. But we go out once a month starting in October through usually April, May timeframe. And we do pub ed, and right now we're targeting like the third graders. And we'll go in each month, and there'll be different topics that we'll discuss, and we'll go over things with them. And to the end of the year, usually in April or May, it depends on how the school schedule looks, we'll take out what we call our smoke trailer or our firehouse. And actually then currently we do the K through 5. We'll have the kids come out, and we basically teach them, hey, if you're in your house and you're asleep and you hear the smoke detector go off, how to safely get out, where to safely go. So basically we're just trying to prepare them in the unfortunate event they do find themselves in a house fire, they can safely get out of the structure. Kind of to further this a little more, some of the other programs we offer here in the city that would tie into pub ed, we have a smoke detector program. So if you're a city resident, you can call the fire department, and we can come out and put you up a smoke detector. Or if you just need a battery change, we can do that free of charge to city residents. We also have some car seat technicians, so if somebody needs help installing a car seat, they can give us a call, schedule a time to come by, and one of those technicians can assist them with that. Some other pub ed stuff that we do are, I have different businesses that'll reach out needing fire extinguisher training, so we can go out and host a class on how to use a fire extinguisher, stuff like that. We're just really customer service oriented and try to meet the needs of the citizens.
So to tie that all up, and I'll tell you, I'll do a feel-good story. With my background in public health, I knew, I actually wrapped up that job and came here. My oldest was 12 weeks old when I came to the chamber. And so I was working with the guys at the fire department in Martinsville, and I had them install my car seat because I was really big on, I want it done properly, I want it done correctly. And so I used that service. But since then, every time I had changed a vehicle, had another child, I always came by one of the stations and had them install. When we went to rear facing to forward facing, always had them install my stuff, check my stuff, make sure it was tight. And I think probably neurotically to the point that some of them are like, Diane, it's good. Like the seatbelt's tight. Like it's all good. But like that was a big deal to me. Just having that background and having to go through some of that stuff and learn what can happen. And then, I had a really terrible car accident in my 20s, and a friend of mine who was in the Martinsville Fire Department was not on shift, but ended up being on the scene. And he was the one who installed my child's car seat. And I was like, and this is why it's such a big deal to me. And he was like, you don't know how many times we've worked a scene and it could have gone another way if a child had been restrained properly.
Right.
And so that's like such a big deal to me. And so I was so thankful to have you guys and to have that service. I live in the county, but I'm just sitting here thinking, I hear you say it. I've heard it said at city council. I don't know how many people know that you guys offer that and that they could come out and do it. And I know you put it out there, and I know you say it, but I would love to help spread some of those messages. So I'd love to see if there's any social media posts that are going to happen on the Team Reidsville site or whatever, but we could put that stuff out too, especially like in Fire Prevention Month or whatever. But we're so thankful for you all and what you do and for how you keep us safe and how you work with the businesses.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me here today to kind of shed some light on what my job consists of and what we do with the fire department.
Yeah, I love it. And we are going to look forward to putting out some information. I had a member business ask me one time when the tax listing is due. They had never seen that before. They'd been open several years, just like everything else. Sometimes it takes government a while to catch up with the businesses. They asked me to put that information out. And so every year I try to remember to put that out. I would love to put out something about the inspections and like what to expect, or maybe a top 3 or a top 5 checklist of make sure you're checking your fire extinguishers, make sure
Yeah.
your lights are working, make sure your alarms are, make sure all these things, and you won't have any issues, you know.
Exactly, and like to your point there, one thing to keep in mind is your extinguishers need to be serviced annually or inspected annually. Even if you're on that 3-year rotation,
Oh, for sure.
you're still required by the code to have them serviced every year.
Oh yeah, we only made that mistake one time, and now ours are done every year
Right.
by our same little fella who runs that company, and I
Right.
cannot think off the top of my head right now. But he comes and does it every year. We love
Yeah.
it. So just paid that check not that long ago. So thank you for being on the show, Seth.
Yep.
Very appreciative of what you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And we will put up, but if they're looking for you, tell them the best number to call.
Sure. You can either call the Station 1 phone number, which is going to be 349-1024, and ask for me, or you can call my office direct, which is 347-2321. And if you don't get me, leave me a voicemail, and I'll get back to you.
Awesome. And they can stop by the station
Sure,
anytime?
anytime. So you can stop by. We do kind of highlighting that. We do tours for kids. So if you got kids that want to come by and see a fire truck, they're welcome to stop in. They may even leave with a sticker and a fire helmet. So
Not to mention, you have a phenomenal memorial outside of the station down
oh
here.
yeah, the 9/11 memorial that was done. Yep, they put a lot of effort and time in that. So that's really neat.
Yeah, and then you guys have the benefit of having the clock tower across the street too. So
Yes, ma'am.
very cool little corner down there.
It is. It is.
It's awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you again.
Well, that's all we have for today. As always, you can find us at the heart of downtown Reidsville at 140 South Scale Street, or on our social media channels, or on our website, reidsvillechamber.org. That's it for today. We'll see you real soon.